This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by the all-new Prezi for Business. Life's too short to sit through boring presentations. Start your free 2-week trial and see how Prezi can help your team avoid death by PowerPoint. Visit www.prezi.com/BeanCast today. Also by Brandfolder. Brandfolder is the solution for managing your digital brand assets. Start your free 90-day trial today at brandfolder.com/BeanCast. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Video conferencing provided by Pluot.co. Episode 481, Killer Crock-Pots. For Monday, January 29th, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. The idea is simple. If you want millennial audiences for your old school network, bring on board a YouTube expert. Only for CNN, they're out $25 million and got virtually nothing. Does this make the theory wrong or just the network? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, P&G continues to disengage from agencies. Why marketers still don't get event technology. Facebook introduces Flicks. Plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Caruso, Mr. Christopher Baccus is here. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, also with us again, the smartest man in the world, experiential marketing expert and founder of the Idea Integration Company, Mr. Saul Colt is here. Hi, Saul.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
I'm glad that you can make it. Now,
I bet you're expecting something quippy, but you only gave me an hour's notice.
Fair, absolutely. Now, next up, we have the founder of the innovation consultancy Evolution, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Hey, Joe.
Hello, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing well. And finally, we welcome back the Marketing Capabilities Director for Global Marketing Excellence at the Campbell Soup Company, Mr. Samuel Monnie. Hey, Sam, what's happening?
Hey, Bob. Happy to be here. Happy New Year. And this should be a great one.
I hope so, because we've got a lot of great topics, and I'm just hoping that everybody brings their A game, and I'm sure you will. We've got this first topic, which is kind of interesting for me. Casey Neistat, he had an app called Beam, which was supposed to bring a panacea of ratings for CNN by bringing in a millennial YouTube audience to the cable news network. But now, $25 million later, in less than a year, Neistat is leaving, and CNN still has an aging audience, which leads me to wonder, Saul, is building a millennial audience for old media brands even worth the attempt? I mean, is this the fault of the millennial strategy as a whole, or is the network to blame? What's your thoughts on this?
So I think this is a classic example of rushing into a trend and not finding the right partner. So I didn't follow this story in real time because Casey really isn't my thing. But as a curious outsider, I always thought it was odd that even after cashing a big, make that a huge check from CNN, he still produced more content for his personal vlog than on CNN. And he didn't really make a huge effort that I could see to move his audience from his personal side to the other content. Again, as an outsider, it seemed like he was hedging his bet from day one and never went all in. So CNN never got what was promised or paid for. If they had done more research and gave half the Casey money to someone like me, they would have gotten about the same amount of content and a whole lot more mentions on the BeanCast. But that aside, in one quote I saw about the whole thing, Casey acknowledges that neither party was benefiting from the partnership. I kind of disagree. one party made out pretty good and will continue to do so with almost no reputation damage, even though he buckled under the pressure of accountability. So if you were to ask me, I think there was a clear winner. I'm just not going to say which side won.
Can I ask a question about that though? Because it's just like
No.
that was my well, thank you. But my first reaction to this story was exactly like you. Here is this guy. He's a YouTube star. He's being paid to bring his audience over, and he doesn't deliver, and so it's his fault. But they bought an app. I mean, they bought a technology which should have delivered even without Neistat involved. I mean, so was it just a bad app purchase? Was it just a bad technology purchase? Or is the fact that he didn't bring over his audience personally from his YouTube channel to blame for this problem? Anybody want to take a stab on that? Joe, any thoughts?
I mean, look, if you're trying to be a media brand delivering news, actualities, and documentary to millennials, it's already been done. It's called Vice.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think I definitely fall into the camp of instead of blaming Neistat, because he was an accomplished guy, and for him to certainly come with a pitch in terms of understanding millennials. I don't doubt that for a second. But at the end of the day, if you just look at commercials on CNN, you'll notice that for the most part, it's oops, I've fallen and I can't get up. And I mean, I don't know how on earth anybody expected him to be successful when you're looking at this kind of demographic. And the reality is millennials just don't consume news through television, through web, etc. Maybe they're consuming it through a mobile app, but really CNN's going to be the one to kind of create a different persona or a different value proposition. I just think it was a fool's errand.
Well, let me ask you this question. Okay, someone's going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say that, as I poked around this story, it was interesting to observe. And when you talk about creative and differences and sluggish process, it feels like there was some sort of cultural fit issues going on. And you can imagine how that might happen, and trying to sort of marry the perhaps more entrepreneurial approach, perhaps different processes, different mindset, different philosophies of creating, with an organization that is a lot more larger, more bona fide and structured. And that feels like something that was inevitable. And how good are they integrating acquisitions? How strong a fit is the product? That's kind of, if I'm thinking about other fields, those are considerations you've got to have. But so that was just one thought I had. I was reading between the lines here, and I'm thinking, and the fact that I think Saul called it out, that I just checked that his YouTube channel went from 6 million at the time to about 9 million. So that's like a 50% increase. So clearly hedging and/or meeting the needs of your audience. So he's doing something right, and he's connecting with an audience and growing there. So, I think if folks had kind of seen that, they would have. How might you tap into the opportunity in a different way versus perhaps what was originally signed up for? Because as he's kind of learnt a year, perhaps received some compensation and continue growing his audience. And then just my third point, which again I'm poking around here. So as I've poked around online, the theory that old media is dying or not connecting with millennials. There's some data suggesting actually there is growth and they are connecting with those audiences. So maybe CNN is seeing benefits elsewhere, that they can kind of sort of cut this deal, close down this deal. But are they really hurting with that audience, or are there other ways that they're growing that audience? And so I don't know if we'll ever get to the truth of it, but I think there's more behind this story than perhaps we're seeing in what's been published.
Well, so I have a bit of a comment on that whole, cultural fit and not, being able to live under that whole, corporate structure. I kind of call BS on that, because one of the articles, and I read a bunch of them, so I don't remember the source, but he flat out said he never delivered a plan, and he was hiding from the corporation, and he just didn't like it. I'm sure, like, I'm softening, and whatever, but he said he hid from them and he never delivered a plan because, and again, this is a little bitterness on my part. I'm going to own it. But once you get to 500,000, once you get to 5 million or 6 million followers, you're just it's an avalanche. You're never going to stop, lose growing people unless you go into a suicide farm or whatever.
Suicide forest,
But
right?
so I honestly don't think most of these tier one YouTuber guys could recreate the lightning that struck them if they had to. And this was really sort of proving it. A lot of the stuff is right place, right time. And, trying to recreate it a second time is almost impossible. And, this just doesn't work. You can't just throw giant amounts of money at these guys and think that
But
lightning's gonna
sometimes it
strike
does.
twice.
But sometimes it does. I mean, look at what happened with Nerdist. I mean, Nerdist has provided a windfall of audience for a whole bunch of different networks. I mean, it's done really well. And you've got other types of millennial news services like Vice, like Newsy, and other types of services like that are doing quite well. Admittedly, Newsy is a Scripps property, but still, I mean, you have some great examples. Go ahead.
Nerdist, Chris Hardwick went all in on this thing, and I don't think Casey did. I keep calling him Casey because I have no idea how to pronounce his last name. But Chris Hardwick went all in, and anytime he was on, a Grammy red carpet or an Emmy red carpet, he talked about his podcast. He talked about his live shows in the back of a comic book shop. He used every opportunity to send people to the places where people were giving him money, and I don't believe this was the same case. Casey was still sending people to his personal stuff because he knew that was the winner.
Can I
So
ask?
he was getting frustrated too, though. Casey was kind of interesting. I don't know if you guys caught it, but his video talking about the end of the relationship and the end of the company and the transition pieces, he actually did multiple cuts of that. The first cut he did of it is about 10 minutes long. He deleted that one. I think he's only got about a 3 or 4 minute one that he kept, maybe 6 minutes. But it was interesting. He kind of talked a lot about what Samuel was saying, where the cultural issues were really stronger and constrictive, so much that he just could not really thrive and be creative. He was not used to having to get approval from anyone for anything that he did. He was used to just kind of throwing something out there, and if it did whatever it did, it was great. And if it wasn't, you just had the next day to go ahead and do another daily vlog. So that's really what he made his fame off of, and it's really a different process and a different culture than what it is meaning to get into like a CNN organization. So I think there's a lot of validity to a lot of those people.
Let's talk about
I want to build on a couple of things, because I think we're obviously all speculating, and that's what we do at the BeanCast. We speculate.
Amen,
and we
brother.
we don't really know exactly what went on, but I think both Sam, in fact, everybody just now raised some pretty interesting points, and so I want to make just 3 of them and just build on that. Number one, if there is anything, and the Nerdist points to that, is that the approach works better from an anchor tenant approach, in meaning a show. The Nerdist is a great example, and then building around the personality or the show. So content is king, and a branded content program versus a channel approach might be the way forward. That's the first point. The second thing is, if Casey came in and he was all about the personal brand, and God knows our industry is filled with people, we won't mention names, although it would be awesome if we could, of people who really went out and took corporate jobs and really were building their personal brand as opposed to their corporate brand. And shame on them for that. But at the same time, ultimately the buck has to stop with CNN. And if they didn't vet him properly, and if they didn't anticipate the cultural mismatch, then it really serves them right. The fact is, one thing I can talk to, is, after running Evolution for 6 years, the first thing we ever said is, what if Kodak acquired Instagram? Might they have survived? And smart people generally, the first response they would have would be, if Kodak had acquired Instagram, they would have basically stuffed it up and destroyed it. And that's probably right. So corporations are still struggling to be able to adapt to and embed and integrate and empower and ultimately not only allow these younger cultures to thrive, but actually recognize they have more to gain by allowing that culture to ultimately take over their own culture, because it is the corporate culture that is struggling right now, not the entrepreneurial, the startup one.
Let me ask you this question, Joe, as a follow-up question, because did CNN have the wrong expectations and just handle it wrong, or did they choose the wrong partner in Neistat? I mean, which would you say is the bigger fault right here for this problem?
I mean, we don't know, except that if we go with Saul Colt's expert sleuthing, it seems that they did choose the wrong partner, and that might have been just a little bit of desperation. You know, they went after, and this is the classic case of borrowed interest, right? Which is they jumped on a celebrity, and even though probably a lot of people warned them, buyer beware, they said we're prepared to kind of ride his feed and his stream, and hopefully he'll carry us along. But it didn't work out. So, ultimately, he may not have been the right partner. It's one of those classic examples, right? 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I think they're probably both at fault.
So what would you say the major roadblocks are for other companies that are looking to do something like this? Is it really just a matter of be very careful about who you get in bed with? Or is it more about choosing to allow this partner, whoever it is, to infuse your culture and change you? What kind of roadblocks would you say you need to watch out for and you need to get around in order to have a success with a partnership with a millennial audience?
Well, I think every situation is different. Every personality is different. Some brands will let people get away with a lot more stuff than they don't. But, like every really successful partnership has to be completely transparent about what expectations are on both sides. So the absolute only reason you would work with someone, like a YouTube star, is to steal their audience, to bring them over. So you have to put that clear in writing and say, we are giving you this big check. Your only job is to create content for these people and make sure they watch it on our platform or whatever platform. And that's the only thing. So if that wasn't clearly, laid out in writing, like this should actually be breach of contract if that was there, and I can't imagine it wasn't there. But
I can imagine there had to have been an earnout of some sort, so he's probably walking away from a good chunk of change, if not all of his money, for making this decision, don't you think?
No, I think that his reputation is completely unharmed. So he's still going to make all that YouTube revenue. There'll be another company that'll probably, be happy to give him probably a lot less money, but still money. But, obviously, I don't know what the deal was, but he's still going to probably get his money from the sale of the app, because they still own the app. They're just not giving him whatever management contract that he had to stick with it over a certain amount of time. And that's all speculation. I haven't read anything either way about any of that stuff, but I'm sure he's not walking away from a big pile of money, because all of us know most people can put up with a lot of crap if there's a big pile of money waiting on the other side of that crap and stuff like that. So I just think this was, a really bad deal. They rushed into it, and, expectations probably weren't clearly laid out. Jeff Zucker, the guy who did the deal, of course, he's, from NBC fame and stuff like that. He's not a stupid guy, very bright. He's done some incredible, moments in television history, brokered some great deals. Obviously, I don't think we're ever going to know it, but I just like the only reason you work with a celebrity is to borrow their cachet. And if the celebrity isn't following through on that, then, you got to figure out a way to recoup your money.
Well, it's an interesting topic, but we got to move on, and we're going to talk next about the fact that P&G has to reduce their media spend with agencies by another 50%. It's definitely a dark time in a lot of the holding companies, but we're going to get to that in just a minute. First, I've got to talk about our sponsor for this evening. Look, as I've said many times here on the show, in a past life, I was a creative. I know the pain firsthand of being told things like, that's not our most updated logo, or where's our font, or what are you using this image for, or being asked to pull stock images scattered across a dozen server links. Look, consistency matters in marketing communications, but how can you expect consistency with logos, fonts, images, and brand guidelines when they're strewn all around the internet? That's why every brand who is listening to this right now needs to get an account with Brand Folder today. That's because Brandfolder is the easy way to store, manipulate, distribute, and track all of your digital assets from a single location. Look, I have a stat here that's going to blow you away if you haven't heard it yet. Did you know that the average creative wastes over 60 hours each year searching for misplaced brand assets? That's almost 2 weeks of productivity lost looking for needles in a haystack, digging through misplaced folders and old emails trying to find the most recent revisions and approvals. Brandfolder's platform solves all this because it allows you to distribute approved brand assets, both publicly or privately. It even provides in-app analytics so you can measure which assets are performing best in the marketplace. And you're not alone when you're using Brandfolder because companies like JetBlue, Slack, Under Armour, and thousands more use Brandfolder to provide a single source of truth for all things related to their brand equity, and your company can do it too. Now, I want you to discover the power of Brandfolder today by going to brandfolder.com/BeanCast to unlock the complete potential of your brand assets with a free, you heard me right, free 90-day trial. That's Brandfolder, BRANDFOLDER, just like it sounds, .com/BeanCast to manage all of your digital assets from one location and set your team up for success in 2018. Brandfolder, strong brands live here, and we thank them for their support of our show. Well, P&G is cutting yet another 50% from their media agency spend in an effort to bring more of their media capabilities in-house. Sam, media is the backbone of the holding company's revenue streams. So is there any recovering at this point? Is P&G's move kind of like a premonition of what a precursor for a much wider movement among brands doing similar things? What's your thoughts?
Well, full disclosure up front, I should say I'm an ex-P&Ger, and so I have formerly been with that company. I don't have any inside knowledge to this particular story. But as I kind of wear the current hat I do, in terms of what I'm doing, is all about developing marketers. And this sort of marketing capability hat that I wear on a regular basis is, I think, actually part of the driver behind this. So if you poke around the article, sort of the story, and start some of the other articles, I mean, I'm just even thinking about, if you're a modern marketer, marketing in the modern age, you got to be more agile, you got to manage complexity and be more effective, and that's one of the things that's going on. But if you just think about the CMO of P&G, now he's been pretty upfront for the last 12, 18, 24 months. He's been describing sort of, the media supply chain as his quotes, murky, quote attributed to him, murky at best, fraudulent at worst. And so those are kind of some of the things that have been said. And then last year he had this ultimatum on digital in terms of accreditation, transparency, and all brand safety, and all these things that he was sort of pushing the industry. So I think it's really been some drivers going on a macro level for quite a while. And then I've just, again, looking into this, you find that other companies in other, like Asda, Walmart in the UK, Shell, HSBC, Mars, Coca-Cola, they're all doing something similar things at the same time. So I just think it's an inevitable trend that's happening in the marketplace, and it's a lot being driven by what's the new normal and what's the new norms. And actually, there are benefits of bringing things in-house, right? And so getting the knowledge, getting the data, equipping yourself in decision making, equipping your marketing organization to be smarter, and owning some of these decisions are all things that's not unique to this situation. That's actually all things that CMOs and senior leaders are thinking about doing. So as I sort of started to think about this, yes, there's a driver driving this in a macro. There's a real business and organizational need, and I think the challenge for the industry is then, okay, how else can they add value? How can they pivot and provide other resources?
And that's my question. That's at the core of my question. Is there a possibility for a pivot for the media agencies, or are they so much dependent upon the revenue from placing media buys from brands? Do they just have no room to make a pivot at this point? And if so, what happens going forward? Yes, Saul, you were going to say something?
The pivot is to get acquired by P&G and be brought in-house because you guys can laugh, but the work isn't going away. If they're bringing in-house, why wouldn't they just start snatching up a couple small agencies and bring in the subject matter experts that they've been working with for 5 or 6 years already, and then they just completely redesign the relationship. But it makes perfect sense for P&G to just start buying a couple of these people, because just like that is what they're going to. And instead of staffing up, they might as well staff up with people that know their business.
Is that the same thing though? I mean, because I can understand bringing in marketing technology capabilities in house, because the demand side is at best a scam. It's just like it's provided just this extra layer that is unnecessary. You can go right to the supply side and you can get the ads that you need, and you don't need to go through any kind of trading desk at an agency. And I think that makes sense for brands to take that in-house. But there is a certain amount of value for the brands in working with agencies when it comes to the mass media buys, like your television, your print buys, because they're buying stuff up front at a reduced price and giving that scale, putting that scale in play of all their clients in order to provide some sort of discount to the brands. So is there still kind of a value in that kind of relationship? Anybody want to take a step at that?
I don't know if it is. I mean, it's kind of interesting. What I've seen in some cases, I'm not at the P&G scale at my client side job, but a lot of the times the discounting you can get because a media buying agency has the multitude of relationships and can get you some scale at that. Some pretty easy negotiation could get you either the same price you were getting from the agency or sometimes even less. So, I'm not sure that benefit is as strong as it always has been. But like I said, P&G is kind of a different animal. It's a different kind of size than what I've dealt with on the media buying side. But I've seen, at least from a smaller kind of company side, that I'm able to go ahead and get similar rates as what the media agency was providing me if I do it even on my own, which we did. We brought all ours in-house about a year ago. And we've gotten great rates, and similar and sometimes even less than what we had from our agency.
I mean, I'll just jump in here because I was doing some research, and I perhaps missed this the first time around, but the ANA, again, this is perhaps more on the digital side. The ANA are sort of recommending that their survey and their report is indicating that all the benefits of bringing some of this in-house, and it's saying something like 35% there's like a 35% figure of bringing programmatic, for example, programmatic in-house, a notable increase from 2016 ANA Forrester report that found only 14% of A&M marketers were reducing the role of their external agency as a result of in-house expansion. And then you've got like the CEO of ANA sort of saying, hey, this is actually a good thing. Marketers should take more control and bringing these responsibilities in-house to enhancing decision making by better understanding costs, etc. So I think the industry. So this is I guess main stage discussions that are happening between the clients and agencies. There's kind of a directive in some respects to do more of this. So this is best practice, as in getting more effective and efficient. So you'll continue to work with agencies, but I think that as you say, the pivot or the value equations is shifting, and there's still going to be opportunities for the media folks to add value in new and different ways. I guess that's just innovation, right?
Let's talk about this.
I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's what the industry and the client side and the industry authorities are driving. So it's not just the client, or in this case the P&G. It's a thing.
Let's talk about the practicality of it, though, because yes, in some senses, it makes a lot of sense for brands to take more of a responsibility for their media spend, and I understand that drive. But the media spend is what's floating the holding companies. It's always the production. It's always the media that has floated the agency networks. So if you take away all that profitability, you still need the agencies around to survive in order to provide creative input and to provide ideas for most of your campaigns. That's something that a lot of brands can't really effectively bring to the table like they can get from the agencies. But the agencies can't possibly support themselves based entirely on a creative model. So especially given the state of procurement at this stage, where everything that's being done for the brand is being treated as a vendor relationship, So, in the end, are the brands just going to shoot themselves in the foot by killing the agency world by doing something like this? Is that a real possibility? Joe, you haven't weighed in. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a fascinating topic, and you have to kind of look backwards in order to extrapolate where we go from here. On one hand, the whole unbundling of media from, I mean, you speak about a creative function, but we're talking about media. We're talking about how media unbundled itself or was unbundled from the creative function, and how ultimately you had these media agencies, the rise of the media agency, almost at the expense of the creative shop, struggling to differentiate itself. Now what's really happening is with automation and with programmatic and with AI and with so many functions now that are technology based, and to your point about procurement and pricing being driven down, what's really happening is we're looking on one hand at the commoditization of media, but really the failure or the inability of media agencies to add value and demonstrate that strategic planning and that strategic value add or value proposition, or quite frankly, because clients are just as much at fault, where clients have actually expected all that strategic thinking for free. The reality is, for the most part, the reason why advertising has survived and thrived for as long as it has is that when brands attempt to take media in-house, it invariably does not work and it invariably fails. The last company to do that was Bush Media, Anheuser-Busch's dedicated media buying arm, and eventually they had to relent as well. So I think what we're seeing is a pendulum shift, and for a while this may in fact become the trend, but what typically happens is it always returns to the center. And so, will the trend continue? Absolutely, as long as the whole programmatic, kind of an automation of media and commoditization occurs. But at some point, man will have to be able to team up with machine. Otherwise, we'll go from extreme to extreme.
I got one last question for Sam here, which is, what is the status of P&G among other brands? I mean, obviously P&G is the biggest consumer packaged good company in the world, so obviously they have a certain amount of influence in the industries that they touch. So are a lot of brands looking to P&G as an example, as like, let's see what happens there, and will this influence more brands to jump on board with taking their media buying in-house?
As I say, when I was sort of poking around this article, it's a number of other brands, a number of large CPGs, retail, financial services. So I think this is broader. Yes, P&G have status in the industry, and absolutely rightly so. They invented brand management and a host of other things that that organization has brought to marketing. So in terms of the community, absolutely they are a barometer, and I think they still remain the biggest advertiser globally. So when you're the biggest, spending the most, people will look up and take notice, and absolutely, certainly. But as I say, I think I was digging around and I saw another like a strategy, a PwC report. This is bigger than them, and it's the whole industry, it's the whole marketing community looking at this and trying to put things together in a way that's going to be future focused, and trying to figure out where should marketers focus their time and their resources, and should that be on their plate or in the domain of their key stakeholders inside the company or outside the company, and other things are going to become available and up for grabs, where subject matter experts and expertise can add value to the entire chain, or the entire, whatever you call it, purchase funnel or decision making funnel or consumer journey. I think as marketers continue to want to be more audience centric and more consumer centric, as they start to want to connect their brand experiences in terms of content and manifesting that, there's other value points that open up, and I don't think anyone's got it right. But when I look at, go back to this story, if you think about, I think they're going from 6,000 and streamlining the numbers, so there's just an efficiency play and a complexity going on that they're looking to simplify. Now in 5 years time, those agency numbers will probably creep back up and things will be different. So this is an ongoing behavior, right? And so one of the things that the article I liked in the article is it talks about this open sourcing approach where which I think is a marvelous intent, where no one agency has the creative. You're flowing to the best person who can solve your brief or solve the business challenge, and ultimately that's what I think CMOs want. That's what marketers want: the best solution to the business challenge or the audience they're trying to connect with. And whoever steps up should be compensated for that. But I think the way it was 5 years ago and the way it's going to be in 5 years' time is going to be different. I can't predict the future. I wish I could. I'd be a multimillionaire. But I think this issue, especially as the industry sort of bodies are saying client-side companies should push in this direction, is telling me that there's going to be more momentum, not less. So P&G, if P&G's kind of doing it at the start of the year, it's only going to get bigger throughout the next 6, 12, 18 months, as far as you can tell, based on them setting the precedent.
Well, I want to move on. I want to talk a little bit about marketers and wanting to experiment with technology at events, but not really understanding how to even get started. It's an interesting conundrum and something that we should be much further past, but we're not. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor, Prezi. And I'm going to throw a stat at you, another stat here, because this one always shocks me. Did you know that the average person will sit through 21,000 hours of slide presentations in their career? 21,000. And even if 10% of them are any good, you still have to spend 19,000 hours being absolutely bored to tears. Now, don't let death by PowerPoint suck the life out of you two, because I've got a much better idea. Put Prezi to work in your office, because the same great interactive cloud-based presentation platform that is so popular with educators is now finally available in a business version, complete with team collaborations and analytics built right in, and it's already gaining a reputation as the must-have tool among the best business presenters in the market today. Look, I've seen a lot of presentations. I'm probably somewhere close to 15,000 hours. I can honestly say that I've never seen a boring Prezi presentation, because instead of slides, you're organizing information on a single open canvas, allowing you to quickly pan to and zoom in on information you want for a really dynamic, visually stunning presentation. Even independent researchers at Harvard found in a double-blind study that Prezi was more engaging, more persuasive, and more effective than PowerPoint, which in English means that Prezi presentations are simply the best way to get your clients to buy, because you're not boring them to death. And right now you can get Prezi for Business for free, so there's absolutely, positively no reason not to at least give it a try. So I want you to go to this website, go to prezi.com/BeanCast. They're going to give you 2 weeks to try it for free. And as a bonus for BeanCast listeners, they're even going to throw in an exclusive design pack worth more than $20 absolutely free. Now I want you to go to prezi.com/BeanCast right now. That's prezi.com/BeanCast. Presentations are just a fact of life, but boredom does not have to be. Wake up your presentations with Prezi, and we thank them very much for their support of our show. Well, a recent study shows that marketers have never been more open to experimenting with technology at events, yet at the same time they can feel completely uninformed and overwhelmed about what to do in the technology space. So, Joe, this is your bailiwick. Why does it continue to be so hard for marketing leaders to keep up with innovations in marketing technology, especially when it comes to events? What's your take on this situation?
I mean, I tried not to be too crabby and grumpy about this topic, because I wasn't sure whether we were talking about lazy marketers or just, quite frankly, the article is a lazy article.
Hallelujah.
I mean, the survey is done by a shop that clearly has a vested interest in the results, and then we're looking at perlers like 94% of respondents think emerging tech has a positive impact on an event. 94. I mean, what about the other 6? But less than 50% actually saw success from using it. And I'm thinking to myself, what's the problem here? I mean, this is endemic of a general reluctance to experiment on one hand. But I mean, I don't think marketers, for the most part, I think they all believe in event marketing. I think they all believe in experiential marketing. And when it comes to technology, I mean, there are so many incredible options to be able to deploy at these kinds of events. And if they're not getting success from them, they're just not asking the right questions or measuring the right things. But for the most part, when you think about, sporting events is a great example to engage fans as they're coming into events or as they're, participating. VR is a fantastic way to kind of bring people in and immerse them in an experiential way. But for the most part, just collecting a damn email address and using that to market, post-event or after the fact, that's still the most effective way to be able to engage, people as they're coming into a stadium or as they're walking into a conference room or as they're attending a festival like South by Southwest. So, I just don't think people are trying hard enough, neither the marketers nor, in this case, the actual author of the article.
Let me get Sam in on this next, because this is what you do day in, day out at Campbell's. You try to make sure that the brand marketers there are connected to innovation and technologies and cool new ways of doing things. Are you finding that people are responsive and getting more results? And when are they being effective? When are they getting the best possible results? Is it come from personal knowledge or finding the right partners, or is it just coming down to just paying more attention to the effort and doing it right?
And I think Joe hit the nail on the head. I was a bit offended by this article, to be honest. I was highly offended. As you say, my day job is to help develop marketers, help them be remarkable. And one of the quotes in here is saying, "Hey, first try putting yourselves in the mindset of the audience before diving into an experiential project." And I'm thinking, whoa, that's just like a fundamental. Understanding your consumer, understanding your brand, are like basic 101s. And then, as Joe called out, like metrics. How do I know I'm succeeding in meeting expectations? That's just like a fundamental question. So I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but I sense that this is just all about spending the time mastering the fundamentals and putting that into practice. And I think people can absolutely do that. So maybe there is some new cutting edge technology that we aren't familiar with that someone might be pitching or suggesting. But I think the familiarity and the understanding of technology and of innovation is absolutely a priority for a lot of companies in terms of immersing their marketers, going to CES, going to events, staying connected to the industry. So this is just a lot of this is just mastering the fundamentals and implementing and doing them well and being held accountable to that. If you're going to do an event and there's stuff showing up that you don't know how you're going to measure it, that's for me is ridiculous. And I don't think there's a lot of people purposely doing ridiculous things. And so it's just mastering the fundamentals, and I think Joe hit the nail on the head on a lot of things. And as I say, I'd like if they gave case studies, for example, of what happened and how things were improved. That might be a bit more tactile and tangible. But this was just a bit of an odd article because it was just throwing out facts and data without really, I don't know, substantiating it. And then the quotes and the statements were kind of so remedial. If you don't understand your audience, how can you be a marketer?
Okay, the article sucked. I think we've come down to the conclusion.
Postulating basic things. So yes, there may be some, but really mastering and understanding your audience has no connection to technology and innovation. That's just a fundamental.
Look, the article may be sucky, but I think from the status of the conversation so far and what we've been actually saying, the point is well taken. That marketers, they do have a certain amount of risk associated with dealing with technology, and I'm wondering, Chris, how much does risk play a factor in whether or not a marketer is going to be willing to do something innovative at an event, considering that there's so much pressure from the internal team to make sure that it gets done right in any kind of effort that's going to be so forward-facing and directly confronting the business clients or customers?
I'd like to rephrase that a little bit. I get where you're going, but I think one of the biggest challenges with event marketing and kind of bringing technology into it is the cost and the scalability. If you're doing event marketing where you're having a multitude of I don't know, like a tour or some different stops across the way, and you're using that technology in more than one event situation, you could kind of scale that cost and do something that's a bit more risky, a bit more technology rich, if you will. Maybe bring in a really fascinating AR component. I agree with Joe. There's a lot of stuff really cool going on inside that area. But there's also, some tired kind of things that are happening too. I mean, the funny thing with the article that I kind of laughed about was the Hilton example, where in 2017, I'm not really picking on Hilton, it's a nice idea and it's fine, but the only creative example out of there was this happiness vending machine, which was an idea from Coca-Cola from 8 years ago. So, it's tough to be really innovative in these event marketing pieces. You still have a lot of digital walls with people hashtagging and showing images from Instagram or social channels. You still have a lot of photo booths and different ways of kind of bringing those things to life. It's just a little tiring. And I think what companies are trying to do is to always take whatever's happening at the physical event and trying to expand what's going on there so that friends, family, other people who are not attending the event could be a part of it, enjoy it, be involved, see what's happening, see what the brand's doing, and you don't have to physically be there. I think that's a lot of times what the technology aspect of event marketing is trying to do, other than doing what Joe brought up about, data, email capture, those kind of things to remarket to people later. But what can we do to create more voice, more reach, more interest in this physical event out into the digital world? And there's just been a lot of hits, a lot of misses with that, because the reality is, if I'm not experiencing it, there's not much for me to do except for a lot of contest or excitement that so and so is at this event that has this really cool car, this really great new product, or this really cool video game at it. So it's very light touch points, and I don't think anything's really tried to, really got that massive reach that everyone's really hoping for, unless it's something that gets a lot of media coverage and really does kind of break the innovative mold, like the Coca-Cola happiness machine that, other brands are going to use and recycle. So I think that's one spot that kind of happens.
I'll also just do a couple of builds and also maybe just take a bit of an opposing perspective, or at least another kind of way to think about it. On one hand, I mean, classic example when you think about South by Southwest, where brands have, brands dive in where angels fear to tread, where you've just had certain brands that have spent so much money on such ridiculous installations that aren't necessarily tied to their brand, to their. They clearly have no objective other than just trying to outspend their competition, and you just know that there is no method to the madness, and there's clearly no clearly defined metrics. To Sam's point as well. So that's no wonder it's difficult to measure success, because it was an absolute fool's errand from the get-go. So you've got that on the one hand, but on the flip side. And I certainly, have come across this plenty of times, from an evolution perspective, is there are brands that don't maybe have a Sam, that don't have the right cultural commitment to capabilities and to innovation, where there are, for example, struggling retail operations, and there is a general reluctance still to invest in technology, or to experiment, or to be able to at least test and learn in order to evolve. So those are two, I think, important factors that maybe should be added to this point of view from an article. One is don't bet it comes down to spend, right? Don't spend too little, or don't stay on the sidelines and not spend anything. That's where the experimentation makes total sense. But on the other hand, don't be an idiot and bet the whole farm, because if you go all in, you're putting it all on the line, and chances are that you're not going to be successful.
I love it when you talk, Joe, because you always use that other hand expression, and I picture like this 8 or 9-handed being who's got on the other hand.
I will tell you just a little personal anecdote. My sister, she always does that. She says on the one hand, on the other hand, on the other hand, and after her 5th hand, I go, you're not an octopus, so you're going to have to limit it to 2 hands.
Well,
So it's genetic.
Well, we got to.
Can I just jump in with one?
If you can do it quick, because we're running out of time.
The whole premise about test and learn. So if there's like client or agency side marketers listening on this call, the challenge to you is you should have between 5 and 10% of your budget should be test and learn, right? And if you don't have it, that's your strife. You got to strive for that this fiscal, next fiscal. And if you do have it, are you spending it or are you just releasing it to the bottom line? That solves a lot of this, because if you have a culture where test and learn happens and you get rewarded for failure because you learn stuff out of it, then good will come out of it. But if you don't even have that, that will kind of reinforce why you're going to get it wrong, because you're going to either be risk averse or you're going to bet the house on something that you weren't really sure about and then be quiet if it doesn't work because you can't afford to fail. So how much test and learn budget do you have, and are you using it?
Okay, I need to move on to the last topic. We only have a minute and just want to touch on it very, very briefly. Facebook has introduced a new measurement system for video viewability called Flicks. And Chris, how important is this move, and does this methodology of counting frames loaded versus nanoseconds really matter to marketers? Can you put this in a kind of a nice little bow and tell us what this all means?
Can I cover this in a frick? Let's see. So, yeah, I don't think it really matters at all to marketers. It's really for programmers and developers, people doing editing at a very detailed part that probably most of us have never done. I know I never have at this level, but it's just a great way to go ahead and try to manage that stuff better. But I don't really think it has much impact for us at the end of the day. And unless they start counting video views by the frick on Facebook and charging us for it. But other than that, I think it's just a minute aspect of covering how complicated and how complex video's gotten, and that we really need to get down to the 1/755 millionth of a second of a frame, which is crazy.
But interesting nonetheless. Well, it's time for the Ad Fail 5, but before we do that, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Christopher Baccus, who you just heard. You can find him at caruso.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Chris. What would you like to promote?
We're just doing some really great stuff over at the Grove in Caruso and really changing around our loyalty program. And so I've just been having a lot of fun. I don't have anything specific to promote, but if you're in LA, get out, visit the Grove, the Americana. We have a lot of cool events. Lunar New Year is coming up, so a lot of fun stuff here in LA.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Now, next up, we have Saul Colt. You can find him at theideaintegration.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Saul. What would you like to promote this week?
Did you notice I dropped off the show for a little bit? I had some internet problems.
I was trying to cover you.
I never miss the plugs, though. So last week on the I Make a Living podcast powered by FreshBooks, we dropped an episode around the topic of depression, and the response has been crazy overwhelming. 11 people emailed me to tell me how much the episode meant to them and how it came at the right time. So 11 may not seem like a crazy number, but remember, only 3 people were moved enough to complain about Janet Jackson and her wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl. So to get people to do anything is kind of incredible. So 11 people, if you haven't checked it out, please give the show a listen at thepodcast.co. That's thepodcast.co. And if you are in LA, continuing the LA theme, come see I Make a Living live. The event will be on February 21st at the Hollywood Improv, featuring an amazing speaker panel consisting of Ralph Garman from The Family Guy and The Orville, Clint Schaff from the LA Times, Lisa Niver, an award-winning travel journalist, and Mickey Krimmel from Superfit Hero, and of course, me. So grab a ticket at www.imakealiving.com.
I can't say enough about these events. They are amazing, and the show is fantastic. I really enjoy doing it with you, Saul, because that episode, that one kind of got to me too, even though I was one of the ones doing the talking. A really, really great one. I would love for you to check it out. Next up, Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at startupsforbrands.com. That's the home of evolution. Tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote?
I actually didn't have time to even think about something to promote because when you said we only had a minute for that final topic, I was trying to calculate how many flicks that was, and I don't know. I think it's 742 billion. I don't know. I clearly wasn't very good at math. But I actually am going to be in LA this week, and so if you want to connect, I might have a little bit of time. I'll be there, I guess, Tuesday and Wednesday. So for anybody listening time delayed on the BeanCast, just ignore that plug. And for others, I'll see you there maybe.
That sounds great. It seems like everybody's going to be in LA. Let's find out if Sam's going to be in LA. You can find Sam Monnie at campbellsoup.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Sam. What would you like to promote? Are you going to be in LA?
I'm not going to be in LA for a few weeks. I'm actually running a work session with some fabulous marketers early next month. So I'm not sure what our paths will cross, but yes, I'll be out there. But listen, good shout out the work that Saul was doing. Actually, it's always hard to go after something which is so, has such great value and, so very purposeful. So a minor shout out or a small shout out to some work that is interesting. There's a podcast that's gone out called Uncanned. It's a partnership that Campbell's is doing, and it's telling real stories about how will humanity feed 9 billion people by 2050. So it's really stories of people who are in, and how they eat and talk about food every day, and just hearing from them and them hearing their stories. And this the first episode, it was just so heart opening, and really proud of the folks who put that together. So it's called Uncanned. You'll find it on iTunes and all the good places, but I'd say check that out and write a comment, a review. Hopefully you like it.
That sounds amazing. And of course, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations for the last week. And first up, this is not really an ad fail per se, but America finally found out how the father died in the NBC show This Is Us. Apparently he dies in a fire caused by a faulty Crock-Pot. Saul, this is putting Newell, the maker of Crock-Pots, in full-on damage control. You kind of have to feel for the company here, because they didn't choose to be part of this, kind of nefarious brand integration that has caused them so much grief.
So I wouldn't call it an ad fail 5. I'd call it an ad missed opportunity. The Crock-Pot people, if they had called me or asked me, I would have suggested they run a web-based ad with a 70s era PSA talking about the warning of faulty wires. There were so many ways they could have actually spun this positively, and instead they just sort of made a couple cheeky tweets saying that how much they thought he was like hot and handsome. It was a real missed opportunity for them.
Yeah, it's too bad. Next up, the NFL was put into a tough position when it had to reject a veterans group ad that encouraged people to stand for the national anthem. Chris, for the last time, people, the kneeling has nothing to do with disrespecting troops.
Yes, it's about Black Lives Matter and the police abuse and stuff like that. Come on, we need to really get on the topic here. But as you know, the other side has reshaped and reframed the conversation and the dialogue here. And so here's this veteran group jumping into how it's been reframed, and it's wrong. But, whatever. Another rejected ad that will get more media.
I just long for simpler times when all we had to worry about was GoDaddy, spokespeople taking their top off. I mean, bring that back, please.
Now, next up, there's a trouble with open dialogue. It's when you censor it, you kind of ruin the whole point, Sam, which is what Google is finding out after it paused its Talks at Google program because of speakers bringing people who supported their views. I mean, I understand Google's position that they're not canceling it. They're just kind of putting it on pause until they rework their system. But it's kind of like the whole point of this was to have open dialogue with controversial issues, isn't it? So if you're not going to have open dialogue with people who don't agree with you, then maybe you shouldn't be doing this in the first place.
Yeah, they're in a bit of a bind, and I think they've got to balance that absolute sort of having open dialogue and also their internal sort of policies and values and inclusivity and all these things. So you're kind of balancing what those commitments are to employees and having open communication. And I'm sure they'll work through it because it's tough for all of us, especially in the current climate we're living in. So my heart goes out to them because it's not an easy thing to do. And I know there's a lot of people working very hard to try and figure it out. So hopefully they land in the right spot that we can all learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, next up, General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, was supposed to be the death of database marketing in Europe. But Joe, as the deadline approaches, only 2 countries have implemented the process and the rest are hedging their bets. So are we sitting here going, this is never going to really be a problem? Or is this just sort of like much delayed as it seems to be right now?
I don't know. I guess it depends which are the 2 countries. If it's Luxembourg and Liechtenstein, I'd say it's time to cash out now and start writing the obituary. I'm kidding. I don't know which 2 it is.
It's Germany and Austria, 2 places that learned back in the 40s the importance of following the rules.
Oh man! And last but not least, the Global Chief Strategy Officer at Saatchi & Saatchi, Richard Huntington, is catching heat for starting a GoFundMe page to cover his dog's medical bills, which is especially rude, Saul, considering that his wife and he have an estimated combined income that's probably north of £1 million a year. This takes some real cheek to go and put a GoFundMe page for $7,000 in vet bills when you're making that kind of money.
Rich people, am I right?
No, I just can't believe it.
No, but listen, the dog was a celebrity. So, like, I think I was reading a case about Grumpy Cat winning like $750,000 copyright infringement. So, the amount of people who follow these celebrity animals and whatever, I think in the current GoFundMe environment, there is obviously very serious people sick and medical issues and those types of things. But I think the new generation or folks these days are using it in a multitude of ways that we can only imagine.
I think you're fighting something that isn't defensible. So what can I say? Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound AdFail and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
Like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know. Like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.